Your brain is addicted to distraction, the inner alarm. You think you're in control, but you're not. Not when you open your phone without thinking, not when you reach for the screen before your eyes are fully open in the morning, not when silence feels unbearable and distraction becomes the default. Something inside you is being trained, not gently but forcefully, to reject stillness. And you didn't choose it, you inherited it. What you call distraction is not a momentary lapse of attention. It's a complete rewiring of the mind, a silent shift, unnoticed, that begins with a single decision: to let the world think for you, to let noise replace thought, movement replace meaning, reaction replace reflection. You scroll not because you want to know, but because your mind can no longer rest. And that's the most dangerous kind of slavery, the one that feels like freedom. When was the last time you were alone with your thoughts, truly alone, without music, without background noise, without checking if something new had happened? When was the last time you walked through a room and didn't carry your screen like a shield? When did you last think a thought all the way through without reaching for stimulation halfway? You don't remember, do you? And it's not your fault. That silence was taken from you. It didn't happen overnight. This erosion of stillness is slow, methodical, and profitable. You were not broken by accident. You were redesigned by systems that profit from your compulsions. A distracted mind is easier to manipulate, easier to sell to, easier to exhaust. Your attention, once sacred, has become currency. You don't pay with your money. You pay with your ability to think, to feel, to be. That's the hidden cost. That's the real theft. And it goes unnoticed because we've normalized it. We celebrate multitasking, glorify being busy, and reward short bursts of artificial productivity. But deep work, the kind that changes lives, can't survive in a fragmented mind. Wisdom can't grow in soil that's constantly being stirred. There is no clarity in chaos, and yet we feed the chaos daily, willingly, even proudly. Now pause, take one breath. Hear the noise behind your thoughts. Do you feel that tension? That urge to move on, to check something, to not stay here too long? That is the addiction speaking, not to a substance, but to interruption. You've become dependent on fragmentation, on novelty, on the false sense of urgency that pulls you away from the moment you're in. And here is the tragedy. Your mind, the very thing that could free you, has become your captor. The systems that once served your growth now serve your escape. You no longer seek truth, only relief, not peace, only stimulation. You fill your day with noise to avoid the weight of silence, and then wonder why nothing feels whole anymore. But here's a truth few dare to face. Distraction is not a habit, it's an identity. The person you are when no one's looking is when the room is quiet, when the mind isn't fed by clicks and likes and buzzes. That's who you are. And most people don't know who that is anymore. They fear meeting themselves, because that meeting reveals the emptiness left behind by years of mental neglect. There is no external enemy more dangerous than an unexamined mind. And yet, we point fingers outward, at platforms, at screens, at culture, while our own choices remain unchecked. You were not born distracted. You were born aware, present, curious. But awareness takes effort, and effort is uncomfortable. So instead, you've become comfortable, and comfort without reflection becomes a prison. The ancient Stoics knew this. They didn't speak of distraction as we do, but they saw its shape, in vanity, in luxury, in idle talk. Seneca warned that life is not short, but that we waste much of it. Marcus Aurelius reminded himself daily, "You have power over your mind, not outside events. Realize this and you will find strength." These men weren't saints, they were soldiers, fighting the same war you're losing now, but with fewer weapons. They didn't have to block notifications or uninstall apps. Their battle was internal. Yours is both. And if you think this doesn't affect you, think again. The cost of distraction is not just time, it's identity. It's your ability to sit with a thought, to choose a direction, to mean what you say. The more you outsource your focus, the more hollow you become. And a hollow man is easy to steer. That's why you're always busy and always behind. That's why you're always connected but always anxious. That's why you keep running even when there's nowhere left to go. But there's a way back. And it doesn't start with quitting everything. It starts with noticing, with questioning the noise, with returning to the self, the quiet self, the one you left behind when you traded attention for entertainment. That self is not gone. It's waiting. Beneath the layers of alerts, beneath the compulsions, beneath the noise, waiting for you to remember that silence is not a void, it's a mirror, and it's time to look again. The invisible addiction. Your distraction is not a weakness of will, it's a chemical conditioning, a neurological loop perfected by time and exploitation. Inside your brain lives an ancient system built for survival, not for the digital storm you live in. That system rewards novelty, seeks change, craves stimulation. Thousands of years ago, this helped you stay alert to danger, find food and adapt. But now it's been hijacked. What once saved you now enslaves you. Every ping of a message, every flicker of a notification, every red icon that begs for attention triggers that same reward circuit. Dopamine fires not as a gift for achievement, but as bait for repetition. You think you're making a choice, but in truth, your brain is being pulled like a puppet by patterns it can't resist. You are no longer searching for meaning. You are searching for the next hit of stimulation. And the tragedy is that the hit never satisfies. Dopamine doesn't deliver pleasure, it promises it. That's why you refresh feeds that never end. That's why you check your phone even when you know there's nothing new. You're not chasing content, you're chasing the chemical spark of maybe. The same mechanism that once made you curious now makes you restless. You've mistaken agitation for interest, movement for growth, novelty for life. You don't realize how deep the loop goes until you try to stop. When you sit in silence and feel the itch to check something, that's withdrawal. When your mind drifts mid-sentence, that's dependency. You've trained your brain to fear stillness. You've conditioned yourself to crave escape from your own consciousness. It's not that you can't focus, it's that you no longer remember what focus feels like. Look closer. This isn't just habit, it's design. Modern systems know your triggers better than you do. They know when you're tired, when you're lonely, when you're vulnerable. They know how to feed you just enough novelty to keep you coming back. Infinite scroll wasn't made for convenience. It was made to erase the concept of enough. Platforms don't sell products. They sell fragments of your attention in endless succession. You are not the customer. You are the inventory. And the more distracted you become, the less aware you are of it. You start mistaking constant stimulation for connection. You call it staying informed. You call it taking a break. But each small indulgence feeds the same loop. Each scroll deepens the trench. Each click strengthens the neural pathways that bind you. And soon you no longer know whether you reached for the device or it reached for you. This addiction hides beneath respectability. It wears the mask of productivity, curiosity, even intelligence. But real intelligence requires depth, and depth demands friction. You can't think deeply when you're being rewarded for thinking fast. You can't see truth when you're blinded by speed. So your thoughts become shallow, your emotions overstimulated, your patience extinct. You begin to confuse reaction for awareness, and the mind starts to fragment under its own noise. The Stoics understood this form of slavery. They called it the loss of reason, the surrender of sovereignty. Epictetus warned, "No man is free who is not master of himself." And yet, every glance at a glowing screen is an act of submission. You're not just losing minutes, you're losing mastery. Because every moment you give to distraction is a moment stolen from presence, from purpose, from the clarity that defines a free mind. The addiction won't announce itself. It whispers. It tells you this moment doesn't matter, that you can check just one more thing. It convinces you that awareness can wait, that life can wait. But each whisper is a theft. Each moment of unconscious attention is a piece of your life bartered away for noise. And the cost compounds quietly, in scattered thoughts, fractured focus, and fading self-trust. The first step toward freedom is to see the chain, to recognize that this isn't about strength, but about design. To understand that what feels like a choice is often manipulation dressed as convenience. The moment you see it, even once, something shifts. You stop blaming yourself and start observing, and that moment, That spark of awareness is the first crack in the loop. The mind that notices its own conditioning begins to reclaim itself. The hijackers. Someone profits from your distraction, not in theory, not metaphorically, tangibly, repeatedly. Your broken focus is a business model. Your scattered mind is monetized. The more your attention fractures, the more predictable you become. The more predictable you are, the easier it is to sell to you, influence you, shape your behavior without your permission. That is not speculation. That is the structure of modern technology. You wake up and reach for your phone before you even speak. That's not coincidence, it's architecture. The colors were tested, the vibrations designed, the feedback loop engineered. Infinite scroll wasn't created to help you. It was built to bypass the mind's natural sense of completion. The end of a page used to be a cue to stop. Now the bottom never comes, because the goal isn't content, it's captivity. And what's most dangerous isn't what you see, it's what you don't. It's how your preferences are predicted, how your time is divided without your awareness. You're shown what the algorithm thinks will keep you on the platform, not what will expand your mind. It doesn't feed your growth. It feeds your dependence. The feed is not neutral. It's a mirror that reflects back your impulses and magnifies them. Not to help you know yourself, but to keep you predictable enough to control. The engineers behind these systems do not hide their intent. Former insiders from Silicon Valley have spoken plainly. We built these tools to capture attention, to drive engagement, to keep people coming back. But even they underestimated the consequences. What began as experimentation became addiction, and that addiction spread, not because you were weak, but because the tools were too effective. Attention is the most powerful currency on earth. Nations rise on it. Movements grow from it. Products sell through it. And the average human gives it away freely 100 times a day in exchange for nothing. You don't lose it all at once. You lose it in tiny fragments. A scroll here, a click there. Until your sense of control becomes an illusion. Until you feel busy, but are achieving nothing. Connected but constantly empty. Stimulated but never satisfied. What's taken is not just your focus, but your depth. When your brain is trained to move every 3 seconds, it stops knowing how to stay. And if you can't stay, you can't think. If you can't think, you can't choose. If you can't choose, someone else chooses for you. That's the silent theft of the distracted mind. Not just its attention, but its will. Your choices become reflexes. Your opinions become echoes. Your emotions become products. This isn't paranoia, it's economics. The more time you spend scrolling, the more ads you see. The more you react, the more data is gathered. The more predictable your behavior, the more profitable you become. They don't need you to be happy, they need you to stay. Not present, just active. Not alive, just engaged. Not reflective, just reactive. They don't sell truth, they sell time. Your time. The Stoics warned against this centuries ago, though they used different language. They spoke of false impressions, of external noise, of the mind being led by things outside itself. Marcus Aurelius said, "Nowhere can man find a quieter or more untroubled retreat than in his own soul." But today the soul is surrounded, the retreat is under siege, and most don't even realize it, because the invaders arrive dressed as convenience. The greatest danger is not that you are controlled, but that you believe you are free while being guided like a puppet. The illusion of choice is more dangerous than the absence of it. When you think you're deciding what to consume, but are in fact being steered by an invisible hand that knows your patterns better than you do, you don't just lose focus, you lose sovereignty. And what happens to a person who no longer owns their attention? They forget how to look inward. They stop asking deep questions. They start craving answers delivered in under 60 seconds. They become impatient with silence, irritated by stillness, addicted to the next thing. But the next thing never satisfies, because it was never meant to. It was meant to keep you searching, not finding. There is no morality in the machine, only metrics, only clicks, views, retention. You are measured by how long you can be kept, not how much you understand. The system does not reward wisdom. It rewards fixation. And the longer you stay trapped inside it, the more you forget what it feels like to be whole. But even now, with your attention pulled in every direction, you still have one choice that matters: to notice, to step back, to begin asking again, is this thought mine or was it planted here? That single question is the beginning of resistance, and resistance is the beginning of freedom. The forgotten skill. Focus was once a virtue, a form of discipline, our sign of maturity. There was a time when a person's depth of thought revealed the weight of their character, to sit with a single idea and let it unfold, to wrestle with silence until it gave something back. This was strength. But that strength is fading, not because we chose to abandon it, but because we stopped seeing its value. In a world that worships speed, depth has become a lost art. The modern mind is trained for fragments, headlines, reels, captions, comments. Our attention jumps before our thoughts finish forming. We live on the surface, never diving beneath it, not because we don't want to, but because we no longer know how. The skill has atrophied. Like a muscle ignored, it weakens. And in its place, we've built a tolerance for noise, a comfort in shallow waters. We call it multitasking. We call it flexibility. But it's fragmentation. Once, boredom was a doorway, a space the mind entered to find clarity, to imagine, to reconnect. Now boredom is treated like an error to be corrected. The moment it appears, we reach for a screen, not realizing that in doing so, we are cutting the thread that leads back to ourselves. We are aborting the thought before it matures, killing the seed before it becomes anything meaningful. This is not a small loss. When you avoid boredom, you avoid growth. The most powerful insights come not in moments of stimulation, but in stillness. Reflection is not born from activity, but from quiet. But we've trained ourselves to avoid that quiet. We've built our lives to escape it. Notifications fill the silence, entertainment kills the space, and convenience steals the chance for depth to emerge. A distracted mind is not just noisy, it's shallow. It touches many things but understands none. It hears everything but listens to nothing. It sees constantly but rarely perceives, and the cost is profound. Because without depth, there is no wisdom. Without wisdom, there is no direction. Without direction, the soul drifts, pulled by every current, swayed by every voice, unsure of who it is or where it's going. The Stoics practiced what we've forgotten. They didn't fill their minds with noise. They emptied them. They didn't avoid boredom. They embraced it as a teacher. Seneca spent long hours in reflection. Epictetus warned that leisure without philosophy becomes a trap. Marcus Aurelius wrote in silence, not to impress others, but to wrestle with himself. They knew that the mind, left to wander without guidance, decays, but when directed inward, it strengthens. What you lack is not motivation, it's mental stillness. What you've lost is not time, it's the ability to dwell in a single place long enough to be changed by it. You think you need more information. What you need is digestion. You think you need more stimulation. What you need is space. You think you need to move faster. What you need is to stop. The skill of focus is not about effort. It's about resistance. The resistance to interrupt yourself. The resistance to seek novelty when depth becomes uncomfortable. It is the strength to stay when your mind screams for escape. It is the decision to see something through, not to impress others, but to train yourself to be whole. And that wholeness doesn't come from intensity. It comes from patience, from returning again and again to the same thought, the same question, the same page, until something breaks open. The world won't reward this. It won't congratulate you for slowing down. But the clarity it brings will change everything, because once you remember how to go deep, you stop being swayed by what is shallow. Once you remember how to stay, you become immune to the pull of distraction. And once you reclaim the skill of focus, you begin to rebuild the parts of yourself that were lost in the noise. This is not about rejecting the modern world. It's about mastering your place within it, using its tools without being used, navigating its noise without being consumed. And that begins by restoring the forgotten skill, the strength to think slowly in a world that demands you react fast. The mental cage. Distraction isn't just a condition. It's a comfort, a shield we build to protect ourselves from something far more terrifying than noise: stillness. Silence, strips away the layers. It forces you to face the weight of your own existence without filters, without noise to numb, without escape routes, and that confrontation, for most, is unbearable. So we run, not with our legs, but with our minds, and every distraction becomes a doorway out of discomfort. This is the cage we build, a mental construct disguised as relief. You don't check your phone because there's something important. You check it to avoid something deeper, a thought, a fear, a memory, a question you're not ready to ask. Distraction is how we avoid truth, and truth, when it surfaces without preparation, can feel like drowning. So we scroll, we refresh, we respond to things that don't matter, all to avoid the one thing that does: ourselves. You call it relaxation, but look closer. It's not rest, it's sedation. True rest leaves you feeling whole. This leaves you emptier, more fractured, more hollow each time. And you begin to fear that stillness, because it no longer feels like peace, it feels like a void. You don't know how to sit still because sitting still brings the mind back home, and home is where you left everything unresolved. This is the modern paradox. We're more comfortable than ever, yet more anxious. We're more connected, yet more isolated. We're constantly stimulated, yet bored out of our minds. Why? Because what we consume doesn't match what we need. It fills the seconds but starves the soul. It keeps you entertained but not enlightened. It keeps you occupied but not alive. The mind, when constantly fed but never exercised, becomes soft. It reacts instead of reflects. It follows impulses instead of intention. It drowns in trivia while starving for truth. And that softening doesn't just affect your ability to focus. It erodes your resilience. It leaves you unprepared for life's sharp edges. It makes you emotionally brittle, spiritually numb, easily shaken. The Stoics would call this loss of interior strength. Seneca wrote that comfort, when unexamined, becomes decay. Marcus reminded himself that a man must be prepared to stand alone in thought, without applause, without distraction, guided only by reason. But we've replaced reason with noise, and in doing so, we've forgotten how to carry ourselves through silence. You don't realize how much of your day is spent running, not towards something, but away. Away from the question, am I living as I should? Because when you're quiet, that question returns, and if the answer is unclear, it hurts. So you silence it with another swipe, another search, another clip, and for a moment, it works, but only for a moment. Then the emptiness returns, and each time it's heavier. This is the cage, not built by anyone else, built by you, brick by brick, notification by notification, and the longer you live inside it, the more natural it feels. Until eventually, silence becomes unbearable, stillness becomes a threat, and your own company becomes the last place you want to be. That is the final trap of distraction. Not that it wastes your time, but that it teaches you to fear yourself. But that fear can be reversed, not through intensity, but through presence. Through practicing stillness the way one might train a muscle. You don't wait until life demands it. You build it before the storm. You choose to sit without input, to walk without sound, to breathe without stimulation. And in that deliberate absence, something ancient returns, a sense of grounding, of ownership, of clarity. The cage breaks not with noise, but with attention, focused, sustained, unapologetic attention. You sit with a question until it's answered. You observe your thoughts without needing to fix them. You reclaim discomfort as a guide, not a threat. And in doing so, you remember that peace is not the absence of conflict. It's the mastery of attention despite it. To master your life, you must first master your gaze, where it lands, how long it stays, what it avoids. Attention is not just a skill, it's a mirror, and the way you use it tells you everything about the way you see yourself, the ritual of recovery. Reclaiming your attention does not require a revolution. It requires a return to simplicity, to quiet, to the kind of presence that doesn't need to perform. You don't need to delete everything. You don't need to retreat to the mountains. What you need is a ritual, not a productivity hack, not another app to track your focus. A ritual, because rituals are sacred. They don't just change what you do, They change what you believe about what you do. This is where recovery begins, not with force but with reverence. You set aside time not to escape the world, but to see it clearly. You create spaces in your life that are protected from noise, not because silence is comfortable, but because it's necessary. Sacred silence isn't passive. It's where the mind returns to its original state, still, sharp, alert. You don't fill that space. You listen. You allow the mind to settle, to process, to remember how to think in long form. Start with minutes. Guard them like hours. Choose a time, a small island in your day, and declare it inviolable. No screens, no sound, just breath and awareness. Not to be productive, but to become present. In that presence, something ancient awakens. The brain remembers, the body softens, the noise fades. And in its place, you begin to hear your own voice again. That voice has been buried, not silenced by force, but drowned out by volume, by preferences fed to you, by algorithms that guess who you are based on how quickly you react. But your truest thoughts move slower than that. They require friction. They require boredom. They require solitude. You must choose them. And rituals help you choose again and again, even when the world tempts you to forget. The next step is conscious subtraction, not a purge, a pruning. Look at your digital landscape like a garden. What grows there? What do you allow to take root and why? Every app, every notification, every platform. Ask what it adds to your life, and more importantly, ask what it steals. Because everything you allow into your field of awareness costs something. If it does not serve your clarity, it serves your fragmentation. And you only get so many moments, you only get so many thoughts per day that are truly yours. Protect them. This is not a war on technology. It's a war on mindlessness. The tools are not the enemy. The loss of intention is. You can use modern tools without becoming their servant. You can operate in the noise without becoming its echo. But only if you decide in advance how far you're willing to go before you turn back. And that's what rituals do. They give you the strength to return again and again to yourself. Stillness can be trained like strength. The more you practice it, the less afraid of it you become. At first, it will feel like suffocation. Your mind will revolt. Your body will itch to move. But that's not a sign of failure, that's withdrawal. That's the system resetting. And if you stay, just long enough to cross the threshold, something changes. The stillness becomes magnetic. You begin to crave it. Not for what it produces, but for who you become inside it. This is where the Stoics lived, not on mountaintops, but in moments, in ordinary spaces guarded by extraordinary discipline. They didn't silence the world, they silenced themselves. They didn't run from discomfort. They welcomed it as a test, a sharpening, a chance to return to reason. Their rituals weren't complicated, they were consistent, and that consistency created freedom. You don't need to win every day. You just need to reclaim one moment, and then another. Each one becomes a thread, and those threads, when pulled with care, unravel the entire web of compulsive distraction. You begin to act with intention, not impulse. You begin to see with clarity, not filters. You begin to remember who you were before the noise, and who you were meant to become beyond it. The ritual is not the end. It's the beginning of your return. It's the anchor you drop when the storm of the world tries to sweep you away. And the more you practice it, the less the storm can touch you. Because a still mind doesn't need to hide. It simply watches, decides, moves with purpose. That's not productivity. That's sovereignty. The warning. There's a cost to distraction that doesn't show up on your screen time report. It doesn't come with a notification. It doesn't make noise when it takes something from you. It moves in silence beneath your awareness, stealing not your minutes, but your essence. And by the time you notice what was lost, the damage has already taken root. What dies first is depth. You stop reading full pages. You skim, you scroll. You consume more but absorb less. Thoughts that once stirred reflection now pass by like static. Your mind, conditioned to constant motion, begins to reject stillness like a foreign object. And in that rejection, you lose something irreplaceable, your ability to connect fully with anything, with a book, with a person, with an idea, even with yourself. Then comes memory. Not just the facts you forget, but the richness, the texture, the emotional imprint of lived experience. Distraction teaches you to live on the surface, to touch everything but hold nothing. And so your memories become shallower. The days blur together. You lose the ability to track who you were becoming because you were never fully present in the moments that shaped you. And eventually something deeper erodes, your confidence in your own mind. When every attempt to focus collapses, when every quiet moment turns into a craving for stimulation, you begin to believe you're incapable. You tell yourself you have no discipline, no attention span, that you're broken, but you're not broken. You're conditioned. The system didn't just distract you. It convinced you that the distraction was your fault. That's the warning no one gives. Not that you'll waste time, but that you'll lose trust in your own capacity to think, to choose, to change. That loss is harder to detect. It doesn't scream. It hums in the background, quietly shaping every decision. It makes you second-guess your instincts, delay your growth, settle into a version of yourself that is smaller than what you were meant to be. You begin to avoid silence, not because it's boring, but because it reminds you of everything you've ignored. Regret grows louder in silence, so does longing. And without clarity, both feel unbearable. So you run. Back to the feed, back to the noise, back to the cycle. And the more you run, the smaller your world becomes. What once was curiosity turns into consumption. What once was intention turns into impulse. This is not sustainable. Our distracted life leads to a distracted death, one marked by fragments, unfinished thoughts, shallow relationships, echoes of potential. And in the final hours, when the noise finally stops and the silence becomes permanent, many realize they were never fully alive, only constantly entertained. The Stoics lived with death in their minds, not as fear, but as focus. Memento mori. Remember that you must die, not to become morbid, but to become awake. To realize that every moment given to distraction is a moment you never get back. Not just in time, but in who you were meant to become during that time. Distraction doesn't just steal your hours, it steals your transformation. So the warning is clear. If you do not reclaim your attention, someone else will shape your life for you. If you do not protect your silence, the noise will define your character. And if you do not pause, you will miss the rarest thing a human can experience, being truly present for the life you are living. You are not just the result of your actions, you are the result of your attention. And where your attention goes, your life follows. Every moment you rescue from distraction is a brick in the foundation of your future self, not a version of you that is faster or more efficient, but a version that is whole, grounded, awake. Let this be the last warning before you forget what it feels like to be fully human. The quiet power. Silence is not weakness. Stillness is not passivity. In a world addicted to motion, these have become the most misunderstood forms of power. But true strength doesn't shout. It doesn't beg for attention. It doesn't need to be seen to exist. True strength is the man who can sit alone in a room, undistracted, undisturbed, unshaken. That is the quiet power the modern world has forgotten. And it is the power you must now reclaim. Because once you stop reacting, you start deciding. Once you stop running from your thoughts, you begin to hear them clearly. Once you stop numbing yourself with stimulation, you start feeling again. And those feelings, raw, unfiltered, uncomfortable, are not your enemy. They are your compass. The discomfort of silence is where your truth begins. Quiet is not an absence. It's a presence so full that it demands your respect. It doesn't offer the same dopamine high as a scroll. It doesn't flash or vibrate or reward you with applause. But it restores something far more valuable, your self-respect. You begin to listen not to the loudest voices, but to the truest one, the one inside you, the one that's been buried beneath the noise, the one that doesn't beg, but waits. And when you reconnect with that voice, everything shifts. Your decisions carry weight. Your words gain intention. Your actions are no longer reactions. They become extensions of your clarity. That clarity begins in silence, not once, not by accident, but through ritual, through practice, through the disciplined decision to pause before you speak, to listen before you consume, to observe before you act. You begin to reclaim space in your day where nothing is allowed but breath. That space becomes sacred, not because of what happens there, but because of what stops happening. You stop reacting to the world like a puppet on strings. You stop seeking validation in pixels and clicks. You begin to move with rhythm instead of noise. And that rhythm brings a steadiness the world cannot touch. The Stoics knew this. They trained their minds not to be loud, but to be calm. They measured strength not by how much noise a man could make, but by how much silence he could hold. When Marcus Aurelius wrote his Meditations, he wasn't trying to impress. He was trying to remember, to return, to resist the pull of a world that would love nothing more than to own his mind. And that resistance made him powerful, not in war, but in wisdom. You are not at war with technology. You are at war with unconsciousness. And that war is won not through resistance alone, but through presence. Not by running away, but by standing still. The moment you stop reaching for stimulation out of habit, you begin to reclaim control. The moment you learn to sit through discomfort without escape, you begin to remember who you are. There is nothing passive about quiet. It's the training ground of those who lead themselves. It's where real discipline lives, not in controlling others, but in mastering the only territory that matters, the inner one. And when you master that, distractions lose their grip. They may still appear, but they no longer define you. You choose when to listen. You choose when to speak. You choose what deserves your attention, and that choice becomes sacred. The world will never stop demanding more of you, more content, more clicks, more urgency. But you are not here to be consumed. You are here to see clearly, to live deliberately, to speak only when the words carry weight, and to act only when the action reflects your values, not your compulsions. This is the quiet power, to be still in the storm, to be focused in the chaos, to be clear when the world is loud, and to choose, not react was every single time. If this message woke something in you, subscribe and leave your reflection in the comments. Not for me, for yourself. This is not the end of the journey. It's the beginning of your return.